Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now let's begin. The air in small towns always feels heavier at night, like the darkness presses in closer than it does anywhere else. I remember that feeling, sitting on the porch steps, listening to the distant hum of a single car passing through the empty main street. The streetlights flickered, casting long, thin shadows that seemed to move when you weren't looking. It was the kind of quiet that made you notice every sound: crickets, the creak of a swing, the soft thud of your own heartbeat. That night, the quiet felt different. It wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that made you feel like you were being watched, even when you knew you were alone. The town was small enough that everyone knew each other's business, or at least thought they did. People left their doors unlocked, trusting that nothing bad ever really happened here. But that trust was starting to crack. There had been whispers, strange things missing from porches, pets not coming home, a window left open and found shut the next morning. Nothing big enough to call the police, but enough to make you double-check the locks before bed. Enough to make you wonder if you really knew your neighbors as well as you thought. That night, the air was thick with the smell of rain and something else, something metallic, sharp, almost like blood. I remember the way my skin prickled, the way my hands shook just a little as I reached for the door. I told myself it was nothing, just nerves, just the stories people told to scare each other. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I could feel it in the way the shadows seemed to stretch across the yard, in the way the wind carried voices that weren't there. I didn't know it yet, but that was the night everything changed. The next morning, the world looked normal, but nothing felt right. I noticed the neighbor's dog barking at the fence, hackles raised, staring at something I couldn't see. Mrs. Carter, who lived across the street, was out watering her garden, but she kept glancing over her shoulder, her eyes darting to the alley behind her house. She waved at me, but her smile was tight, forced. I tried to shake off the feeling, but it clung to me all day, like a shadow I couldn't step out of. At the grocery store, people whispered in the aisles. Someone's shed had been broken into. Tools missing, a bike gone. The sheriff's car was parked outside, but he just stood there, talking quietly to the store owner, his face pale and drawn. I overheard him say, "It's probably just kids," but his voice didn't sound convincing. When I paid for my groceries, the cashier's hands trembled as she handed me my change. She didn't look me in the eye. That night, I locked every window, checked the doors twice. I tried to read, but every little sound made me jump. The wind rattled the old screen door, and I thought I saw a shape move past the window, but when I looked, there was nothing there. My phone buzzed, a text from my friend Mark. "Did you hear about the cat?" it read. I called him, and he told me in a low voice that someone had found a cat, cut up, left on the steps of the old church. "Who would do that?" he whispered. I didn't have an answer. Sleep didn't come easy. I kept thinking about the cat, about the missing tools, about the way Mrs. Carter's hands shook as she watered her roses. I thought about the stories my dad used to tell me, about how evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like your neighbor, your friend, someone you trust. I tried to tell myself it was just a string of bad luck, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching, waiting. A few nights later, I woke up to the sound of footsteps on the porch. Slow, careful, like someone trying not to be heard. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. I lay there, frozen, listening. The footsteps stopped right outside my window. I held my breath, staring at the ceiling, too scared to move. After what felt like forever, the footsteps moved away, fading into the night. I wanted to believe it was just an animal, maybe a stray dog, but I knew better. The next morning, I found muddy footprints on the porch, too big to be a dog, too heavy. That was when I realized this wasn't just a string of bad luck. Someone was out there, and they were getting closer. The night it all came to a head. The air was so still it felt like the whole town was holding its breath. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when I heard the back door creak open. Not the wind this time. Not an animal. The sound was too careful, too slow. My chest tightened. I reached for my phone, but my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I could hear footsteps moving through the kitchen, the soft scrape of shoes on linoleum. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. I slid out of bed, heart pounding so loud I was sure whoever was in the house could hear it. I crept to the hallway, every step feeling like it took a year. The living room was dark, but I could see a shape moving, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with purpose. I recognized the jacket before I saw the face. Mark. My friend. The one who'd called about the cat, who'd sat on my porch 100 times, laughing and sharing secrets. He was rifling through drawers, moving things around like he was looking for something specific. He turned and saw me. For a second, neither of us moved. His face was blank, empty, like he wasn't even there. Then he smiled, but it wasn't the smile I knew. It was cold, twisted. "You shouldn't be up," he said, voice flat. I backed away, but he stepped forward, blocking the only way out. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. All the little things, the strange texts, the way he always seemed to know what was happening, the way he'd started showing up at odd hours. It all clicked together in a sickening rush. He reached for me, and I bolted, shoving past him, running barefoot out the front door into the night. I didn't look back. I just ran, the cold air burning my lungs, my heart hammering in my chest. I could hear him behind me calling my name, but it didn't sound like him anymore. It sounded like a stranger. I didn't stop running until I reached Mrs. Carter's house, banging on her door until my fists hurt. She opened it, eyes wide with fear, and pulled me inside without a word. I tried to explain, but the words came out in broken pieces. Mark, my house, the back door, his face. She called the sheriff, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. I sat on her couch, knees pulled to my chest, listening to the sound of my own breathing,
Police found
trying to
Mark
make
wandering
sense of
the
what
street
had just
a
happened.
few
Few blocks away. He didn't fight, didn't say a word. They found a bag in his car, my things from other houses, even the missing tools and the neighbor's bike. The sheriff said Mark had been breaking into homes for weeks, maybe longer. Nobody knew why. He'd always seemed so normal, so harmless. I kept thinking about all the times I'd let him in, trusted him, told him things I'd never told anyone else. After that night, nothing felt safe anymore. I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. People in town stopped talking to each other as much, started locking their doors, looking over their shoulders. The trust that held our little town together was gone, replaced by something colder, something that didn't go away, even in the daylight. After that night, I started seeing the world differently. I used to believe that you could know someone just by growing up next to them, sharing secrets, laughing at the same old jokes. Now, I'm not so sure. Sometimes I catch myself replaying every conversation I ever had with Mark, searching for some sign I missed, some warning that could have changed everything. But there's nothing. Just the memory of his voice, his smile, the way he used to say everything would be okay. I still live in the same house, but it doesn't feel like home anymore. I keep the doors locked, the curtains drawn, and I flinch every time someone knocks. People in town have changed, too. We all walk a little faster, talk a little less. There's a space between us now, a kind of quiet suspicion that never really goes away. I wonder if it will ever feel safe again, or if this is just how things are now. Sometimes late at night, I think about how close I came to letting him in again, even after I knew something was wrong. I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't run, if I'd trusted him one more time. The scariest part isn't what he did, or even why he did it. It's how easy it was for him to hide in plain sight, how easy it was for all of us to believe that nothing bad could ever happen here. That's what keeps me up at night, the thought that you never really know who's standing on the other side of the door. The first time I noticed the car, it was parked at the edge of the woods, just past the old Miller barn. It was dusk, and the sky was turning that deep blue that made everything look a little unreal. I was walking home from my friend's house, cutting through the back fields like I always did. The car's headlights were off, but I could see the shape of someone sitting behind the wheel, unmoving, just watching. I told myself it was nothing, maybe someone waiting for a friend, maybe a farmer checking his land. But as I got closer, the car started up and drove away, slow and silent, tires crunching on the gravel. After that, I started seeing cars everywhere. At the gas station, parked across the street from the school, idling at the end of my block late at night. It was always the same. Windows tinted too dark to see inside, engine running, never staying long enough for anyone to get a good look. I tried to ignore it, but it was like the car was following me, always just out of reach, always watching. My parents didn't believe me at first. They said I was imagining things, that small towns are safe, that nothing like that ever happens here. But I knew what I saw. I started walking home with friends, taking different routes, but the car always found me. I started to feel like I was being hunted, like someone was waiting for me to slip up, to be alone. The feeling grew heavier every day, until I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything except that car and the person inside it, waiting for the right moment. It got worse when the phone calls started. At first, it was just silence, heavy breathing, the faint sound of a radio in the background. Then one night, a voice whispered my name. I hung up, heart pounding, hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I told my parents again, but they just looked at each other, worried but not really believing me. It's probably a prank, my dad said, trying to sound calm. But I could see the fear in his eyes. At school, I started to notice people acting strange. My best friend, Jamie, stopped walking home with me, saying her mom wanted her home earlier. Teachers watched me with pity, like they knew something I didn't. I overheard 2 kids in the hallway whispering about the car, about how it had been seen outside other houses too. But nobody did anything. Nobody wanted to believe that something bad could happen here. One night, I woke up to the sound of gravel crunching outside my window. I peeked through the blinds and saw the car parked at the end of the driveway, headlights off, engine running. I could see the faint glow of a cigarette inside, the tip burning bright in the darkness. I froze, too scared to move, too scared to wake my parents. I watched as the car sat there for what felt like hours, then slowly backed out and disappeared down the road. After that, I started carrying a pocket knife everywhere I went. I stopped going out after dark. I started locking my bedroom door at night, even though my parents said it was silly. I felt like I was losing my mind, like nobody believed me, like I was completely alone. The car kept coming back, always at different times, always just close enough for me to see it, but never close enough for anyone else to notice. I started to wonder if I was imagining it, if maybe I was just going crazy. But deep down, I knew it was real. I could feel it watching me waiting. The night it finally happened, the air was thick and heavy, the kind of night where every sound feels louder than it should. I was home alone. My parents had gone to a town meeting, and I was supposed to be finishing my homework. I kept glancing out the window, half expecting to see the car, but the street was empty. I tried to focus, but my mind kept drifting, every creak of the house making me jump. Then the phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick it up. Silence at first, then the same voice, low and rough, whispering, "I see you." My blood ran cold. I dropped the phone and ran to the window. The car was parked right outside, closer than ever, engine idling, headlights off. I could see the outline of a man in the driver's seat, just sitting there, staring at the house. I grabbed my knife and backed away from the window, heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I heard the front gate creak open, footsteps crunching on the gravel. I locked my bedroom door and pressed my back against it, holding the knife so tight my knuckles turned white. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. I could hear breathing, slow and steady, just on the other side. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't make a sound. The doorknob rattled, then stopped. Silence. I waited, barely breathing, until I heard the footsteps retreat, the front door open and close, the car start up and drive away. I stayed there, frozen, until my parents came home and found me still clutching the knife, shaking and pale, unable to speak. After that night, everything changed. My parents finally believed me, but it was too late for comfort. The police came, took my statement, drove up and down the streets, but the car was gone. They said they'd keep an eye out, but I could tell they didn't expect to find anything. For weeks, I jumped at every sound, every passing car. I barely slept, barely ate. My friends stopped calling, too scared to get involved, or maybe just not knowing what to say. The car never came back, but the fear stayed. I started seeing danger everywhere, in every stranger, every shadow, every unexpected noise. My parents put up cameras, got a new security system, but it didn't help. The damage was already done. I felt like I'd lost something I could never get back, the feeling that I was safe, that nothing bad could happen to me in my own home. Sometimes I wonder who was in that car, what they wanted, why they chose me. I wonder if they ever came back, just to watch, just to see if I was still afraid. I'll never know. The police never found them, never even found the car. People in town stopped talking about it after a while, like if they ignored it long enough, it would just go away. But it never really does. I still check the windows every night before I go to bed. I still flinch when the phone rings, when a car drives by too slowly. I know I'm not the same person I was before. I don't trust as easily. I don't walk home alone. I don't believe in small-town safety anymore. The scariest part isn't what happened, or even what could have happened. It's how quickly everything can change, how easily someone can slip into your life and take away your sense of safety, just by watching, just by waiting. That's what I think about most, the idea that sometimes the worst things don't happen all at once. Sometimes they happen slowly, quietly, until you realize you're never really alone, even when you want to be. The first time I realized something was wrong with my brother, it was a Sunday afternoon, the kind where the whole town felt sleepy and safe. We were sitting at the kitchen table, sunlight spilling across the floor, the smell of my mom's pie cooling on the counter. My brother, Sam, was always quiet, but that day he was different, jumpy, eyes darting to the window every few minutes, barely touching his food. I asked him what was wrong, but he just shrugged, said he was tired. Later, I found him in the backyard, standing perfectly still, staring at the woods behind our house. He didn't even turn when I called his name. I remember the way the hair on my arms stood up, the way the air felt suddenly colder, like a storm was coming. I tried to laugh it off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us from the trees. That night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. I thought it was my parents, but when I peeked out, I saw Sam barefoot, walking toward the back door. He didn't look at me, didn't say a word. He just slipped outside and disappeared into the darkness. I waited for him to come back, but he didn't. I sat by the window, watching the woods, heart pounding, wondering what could possibly be out there that would make my brother leave in the middle of the night. The next morning, Sam was back, sitting at the kitchen table like nothing had happened. His clothes were muddy, his hands scratched up, but when I asked where he'd been, he just said he couldn't sleep. My parents didn't notice anything strange, but I did. He jumped at every sound, flinched when someone touched him, barely spoke at all. At school, he started getting into fights, coming home with bruises he wouldn't explain. He stopped hanging out with his friends, stopped answering my questions. One night, I heard him talking in his room, whispering to someone I couldn't see. When I opened the door, he snapped at me, told me to leave him alone. I caught a glimpse of his notebook on the bed, pages filled with drawings of the woods, of eyes staring out from the darkness, of strange symbols I didn't recognize. I tried to tell my parents, but they just said he was going through a phase, that he'd be fine. Things got worse. Sam started locking his door at night, sneaking out more often, coming back with cuts and scrapes he refused to explain. I started to feel like I was living with a stranger, someone who looked like my brother, but wasn't really him anymore. I tried to follow him once, but he disappeared into the trees so quickly I lost him in seconds. When he came back that night, he looked at me with a coldness I'd never seen before, like he didn't even know who I was. Then things started happening around town. Someone's shed was set on fire. A neighbor's dog went missing. People started whispering about teenagers causing trouble, but I knew it was more than that. I saw the way Sam watched the woods, the way he flinched at the sound of sirens, the way he avoided everyone, even me. I started to wonder if he was involved, if he was hiding something terrible. The night everything came to a head, I woke up to the sound of shouting outside. I ran to the window and saw Sam in the backyard, standing at the edge of the woods, arguing with someone I couldn't see. His voice was desperate, angry, nothing like the brother I remembered. I grabbed a flashlight and ran outside, heart pounding, feet bare on the cold grass. When I reached him, he spun around, eyes wild, face streaked with tears. "You shouldn't be here," he hissed, glancing over his shoulder at the darkness behind him. I shone the flashlight into the trees, but there was nothing there, just shadows and the sound of wind in the branches. Sam grabbed my arm, his grip so tight it hurt. "They're watching," he whispered, voice shaking. "They know everything." I tried to pull away, but he wouldn't let go. He started sobbing, begging me to leave, to go back inside and lock the doors. I'd never seen him so scared, so broken. Suddenly, he let go and ran into the woods, disappearing into the darkness. I called after him, but he didn't come back. I stood there, shaking, flashlight trembling in my hand, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. The police found Sam the next morning, curled up at the base of a tree, shivering and covered in scratches. He wouldn't talk to anyone, wouldn't look at me. They took him to the hospital and said he was exhausted, dehydrated, maybe having some kind of breakdown. My parents tried to act like everything was normal, but I could see the fear in their eyes, the way they avoided talking about what had happened. After that, Sam changed. He stopped going outside, stopped talking to anyone, and barely left his room. The drawings disappeared, but the fear stayed. I tried to reach him, but it was like he'd built a wall around himself, one I couldn't break through. The town moved on, blamed the fires and missing pets on board kids, but I knew better. I knew something had happened in those woods, something that had broken my brother in a way I couldn't fix. Sometimes I wonder what Sam saw out there, what he was running from, or maybe what he was running toward. He never told me, never spoke about that night again. I still see him sometimes, sitting by the window, staring at the trees, eyes hollow and distant. I wish I could help him, wish I could go back and do something different, but I know it wouldn't matter. Some things can't be fixed. The scariest part isn't what happened to Sam, or even what might still be out there in the woods. It's how quickly someone you love can become a stranger, how helpless you feel when you realize you can't protect them from the things that haunt them. I used to think monsters lived in the dark, but now I know they live inside us, in the things we can't explain, in the secrets we keep from each other. And sometimes, the scariest thing is never really knowing the truth. The first time I noticed the notes, I thought it was a joke. A scrap of paper tucked under my windshield wiper, just a single word: careful. I laughed it off, showed it to my coworker at the diner, and we both shrugged. Small towns are full of pranks, and I figured it was just someone being weird. But then it happened again. This time, the note was taped to my front door. You're being watched. The handwriting was neat, almost careful, and there was no signature, no clue who it was from. After that, I started to feel it everywhere I went. At the grocery store, I'd catch someone staring at me, but when I turned, they'd look away. At work, I'd find my locker open, my things moved around, but nothing ever missing. My friends told me I was being paranoid, that I was just stressed from working too many late shifts. But I knew something was off. I could feel it in the way my skin prickled when I walked home at night, in the way the shadows seemed to stretch across the sidewalk, reaching for me. One night, I came home to find my bedroom window open, even though I was sure I'd closed it that morning. There was another note on my pillow: I know your secrets. My hands shook as I read it, and for the first time, I realized this wasn't a joke. Someone was watching me, someone who knew where I lived, who knew how to get inside my house. I started to wonder what else they knew, and what they wanted from me. I started double-checking every lock, every window, every night. I barely slept, jumping at every creak and groan of the old house. My friends stopped coming over, tired of my constant anxiety. Even my mom, who lived across town, started calling less, her voice tight with worry every time we spoke. I tried to act normal at work, but I could feel the eyes on me, the way customers lingered a little too long, the way my boss started asking if everything was okay at home. The notes kept coming. Sometimes they slipped into my bag at work, sometimes left in my car, sometimes just appeared on my kitchen table, even though I always locked the door. You can't hide. I see you. Soon. The words were always short, always written in that same careful hand. I started to wonder if it was someone I knew, someone I saw every day. I watched everyone looking for a sign, a slip, anything that would give them away. But everyone acted normal, friendly, like nothing was wrong. One night, I heard footsteps outside my window. I froze, heart pounding, listening as someone circled the house, slow and deliberate. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, there was no one there. They found another note tucked under the doormat. They can't help you. The officer tried to reassure me, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. He told me to stay with a friend, but I had nowhere to go. I started carrying pepper spray everywhere, started sleeping with a flashlight and my phone clutched in my hand. I stopped going out after dark, stopped answering the door unless I knew who it was. But the notes kept coming, and the feeling of being watched never went away. I started to wonder if I was losing my mind, if maybe I was imagining it all. But deep down, I knew it was real. Someone was out there, and they weren't going to stop. The night it all came to a head, I was closing up at the diner, wiping down the last table, when I saw a figure standing outside, just beyond the glow of the streetlight. I couldn't see their faces, but I knew they were watching me. My boss offered to walk me to my car, but I told him I was fine, not wanting to seem weak. As soon as I stepped outside, I felt the air shift, heavy and electric, like a storm was about to break. I hurried to my car, keys clutched between my fingers, eyes darting to every shadow. I was almost there when I heard footsteps behind me, quick and purposeful. I spun around, heart in my throat, and saw someone standing just a few feet away, face hidden by a hood. They didn't say anything, just held out another note. My hands shook as I took it, the paper cold and damp. "This is your last warning," it read. I tried to back away, but the figure stepped closer, blocking my path. I could see their eyes now, cold and empty, no hint of recognition. I raised my pepper spray, ready to use it, but they just laughed, a low, quiet sound that made my skin crawl. Then, just as suddenly, they turned and disappeared into the darkness, leaving me standing there, shaking and alone, the note crumpled in my fist. After that night, I couldn't take it anymore. I packed a bag and left town, staying with my mom until I could find somewhere else to live. The police never found the person who left the notes, never figured out how they got into my house. never even found a fingerprint. My boss called to say someone had been asking about me at the diner, but he didn't know who it was. I changed my number, deleted my social media, and tried to disappear. But the fear never really left. I still jump at every unexpected sound, still check the locks 3 times before I go to bed. I lost touch with most of my friends, too embarrassed to explain why I left, too scared to let anyone get close. The notes stopped, but the feeling of being watched never did. I don't know if it ever will. Sometimes I wonder who it was, what they wanted, why they chose me. I wonder if they ever moved on to someone else, or if they're still out there waiting for me to come back. I'll never know. The scariest part isn't the notes, or the footsteps, or even the night in the parking lot. It's how easy it was for someone to slip into my life, to make me question everything and everyone around me, to make me feel completely alone. I used to think I was strong, that nothing could shake me. Now I know better. Now I know how quickly fear can take over, how it can change the way you see the world, the way you see yourself. I don't trust as easily anymore. I don't let people in. And sometimes late at night, I still wake up thinking I hear footsteps outside my window, and I wonder if I'll ever really feel safe again. I always thought the library was the safest place in town. It was small, quiet, and always smelled like old paper and lemon cleaner. I started working there after school, shelving books and helping Mrs. Green, the librarian, with the returns. Most days, it was just the 2 of us and a handful of regulars, retired folks, a couple of kids doing homework, and the same man who came in every Thursday to read the newspaper. But one winter, something changed. People started talking about things going missing, wallets, keys, even a wedding ring. Mrs. Green said it was probably just forgetfulness, but I could see the worry in her eyes. One evening, as I was closing up, I noticed a book out of place on the back shelf. When I reached for it, I found a small, folded piece of paper tucked inside. It just said, "You're next." My heart skipped. I looked around, but the library was empty except for Mrs. Green, who was counting the cash drawer at the front desk. I tried to laugh it off, but the words stuck with me, echoing in my mind as I walked home in the dark, the snow crunching under my boots. After that, I started to notice little things. Books left open on tables, chairs pulled out when no one had been sitting there, the feeling of being watched from the stacks. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I was letting the stories get to me. But every night, as I locked the doors and turned off the lights, I felt like someone was still there, hiding just out of sight. The missing items kept piling up. Mrs. Green started locking the staff room and double-checking the windows every night. She asked me if I'd seen anything strange, but I just shook my head. I didn't want her to think I was scared, even though I was. One afternoon, I found another note, this time slipped between the pages of a book I was shelving. "Don't trust her," it said. The handwriting was the same as before, neat, almost careful. I tried to show Mrs. Green, but she just smiled and said it was probably a prank. I started watching everyone who came in. The regulars seemed the same, but there was a new guy, mid-30s, always wearing a dark coat, never checking out any books. He'd just sit in the corner, pretending to read, but I'd catch him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. One night, as I was leaving, I saw him standing across the street, half hidden by the shadows. He didn't move, didn't say anything, just watched as I hurried home. The next day, Mrs. Green was different. She was jumpy, snapping at me for little things, and kept glancing at the front door. I found her in the staff room, crying quietly. She said someone had broken into her house the night before, but nothing was taken. Just a single book left on her kitchen table. One from the library, one that had gone missing weeks ago. She didn't want to call the police. She said it would only make things worse. That night, I stayed late to help her catch up on paperwork. The library was empty, the snow falling thick outside, muffling every sound. I heard footsteps in the stacks, slow and careful. I called out, but no one answered. When I went to check, I found another note, taped to the back door. "You're not alone." My hands shook as I locked up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us, waiting for us to leave. The night it all came to a head, Mrs. Green asked me to stay late again. She said she didn't want to be alone. The library was quiet. The only sound was the ticking of the old clock above the desk. We were sorting through the lost and found box when the lights flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. I heard the back door creak open, then footsteps, heavy, slow, moving toward us. Mrs. Green grabbed my hand, her grip tight and desperate. We crouched behind the desk, listening as the footsteps moved through the aisles, pausing every few seconds. I could hear my own breathing, sharp and ragged. The footsteps stopped right on the other side of the desk. I could see the shadow of someone standing there, just inches away. Then a voice low, almost gentle. "I just want what's mine." I recognized it. The man in the dark coat. He started talking about the missing ring, about how it belonged to his mother, about how he knew Mrs. Green had it. She started to cry, whispering that she didn't know what he was talking about. He slammed his fist on the desk, making me jump. "I know you took it," he hissed. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. Mrs. Green finally stood up, hands shaking, and told him to leave. He stared at her for a long moment, then turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. The lights flickered back on, and we just stood there, shaking, too scared to speak. After that night, Mrs. Green quit her job. She moved out of town without saying goodbye. The police came and took a report, but they never found the man in the dark coat. The missing ring was never found, and the notes stopped appearing. The library felt emptier than ever, the silence heavier, the shadows longer. I kept working there for a while, but it was never the same. Every time the door creaked or a book fell off a shelf, I jumped. The regulars stopped coming as often, and the new librarian kept the doors locked at all times. I started to wonder if the library had always been this lonely, or if something had changed it forever. Sometimes I think about Mrs. Green, about the way she looked that last night, scared, tired, defeated. I wonder if she really did take the ring, or if the man in the dark coat was just looking for someone to blame. I'll never know. The scariest part isn't the break-in, or the notes, or even the night the lights went out. It's how quickly trust can disappear, how easily fear can take over a place you thought was safe. Now, when I walk past the library, I don't go inside. I don't want to remember the way it felt to be watched, to be threatened, to realize that sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who keep the biggest secrets. I used to think the library was a place for stories, a place where nothing bad could happen. Now I know better. Some stories don't have happy endings, and some places never feel safe again. The summer I turned 16, my dad got a job as the night manager at the only gas station on the edge of town. It was the kind of place that always felt a little too quiet after dark, with the hum of the fluorescent lights and the empty highway stretching out into nothing. Sometimes, when he was short-staffed, I'd go in to help him stock shelves or clean up. Most nights were boring, just a few regulars coming in for cigarettes or coffee. But there was one customer who made my skin crawl. He always came in just before closing, never said a word, just stared at me with these cold, flat eyes. He'd buy the same things every time: a can of beer, a pack of gum, and a single lottery ticket. He never smiled, never made small talk, just watched me as I rang him up. My dad said he was harmless, just lonely, but I wasn't so sure. There was something about the way he moved, slow and deliberate, like he was waiting for something. One night, my dad had to run to the back to fix a leak, leaving me alone at the register. The man came in, earlier than usual. He stood by the door for a long time, just watching me. I tried to ignore him, but I could feel his eyes on me, heavy and unblinking. When he finally came up to the counter, he leaned in close and whispered, "You shouldn't be here alone." His breath smelled like stale beer and cigarettes. I froze, heart pounding, as he slid his money across the counter and left without another word. That was the first time I felt real fear, the kind that sticks with you long after the moment is over. After that night, I started dreading my shifts. Every time the bell over the door rang, I jumped. My dad noticed, but I just told him I was tired. The man kept coming back, always at the same time, always buying the same things. Sometimes he'd stand outside after closing, just watching the lights go out. I started having nightmares about him, waking up in a cold sweat, convinced he was standing at the foot of my bed. One night, my dad got a call from home. My little brother had a fever, and my mom needed help. He told me to lock the doors and wait for him to come back. I tried to argue, but he was already gone. I locked up, turned off the lights, and sat behind the counter, trying to calm down. That's when I heard the tapping on the glass. I looked up and saw the man standing outside, face pressed against the window, eyes fixed on me. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. I called my dad, but he didn't pick up. I tried the police, but the line was busy. The man started walking around the building, tapping on each window as he passed. I could hear his footsteps crunching on the gravel, slow and steady. I hid under the counter, clutching my phone, trying not to breathe. The tapping stopped, and for a moment, everything was silent. Then I heard the back door rattle, the sound of someone trying the handle. I remembered my dad's words, "Always keep the back door locked." My hands shook as I checked the lock, making sure it was secure. The man circled the building for what felt like hours, tapping, rattling, waiting. I stayed hidden, too scared to move, too scared to even look. When my dad finally came back, the man was gone. I tried to tell him what happened, but he just shook his head, said I was letting my imagination get the best of me. But I knew what I'd seen. I knew I wasn't imagining it. A week later, my dad called in sick, and I had to work the closing shift alone. I begged him to let me stay home, but he said we needed the money. The night was quiet, almost peaceful, until just before closing. The man came in, but this time, he didn't go to the counter. He wandered the aisles, picking things up and putting them back, always keeping me in his line of sight. I tried to stay calm, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely count the register. When I announced we were closing, he ignored me, moving closer, his footsteps echoing in the empty store. He stopped in front of the counter, staring at me with those dead eyes. "You shouldn't be here," he said again, voice flat and cold. I tried to back away, but he reached across the counter and grabbed my wrist, his grip like iron. "You need to leave. Now." I yanked my hand free and ran for the back room, slamming the door and locking it behind me. I could hear him pounding on the door, shouting, but the words didn't make sense. I called the police, voice shaking, and waited in the dark, listening to the sound of his fists on the door. When the sirens finally came, everything went quiet. The police found the man outside, sitting on the curb, staring at the ground. He didn't resist, didn't say a word, just let them take him away. After that night, I never worked at the gas station again. My dad apologized, said he should have listened, but it didn't matter. The man was arrested, but they let him go a few days later. No charges, no explanation. He just disappeared. For weeks, I jumped at every sound, every shadow. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, watching, waiting. The gas station got new locks, new cameras, but it didn't help. The fear was already inside me, a part of me I couldn't get rid of. My dad quit his job a month later, saying it wasn't worth it. We never talked about what happened, but I could see the guilt in his eyes every time he looked at me. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't locked the back door, if I hadn't run when I did. I wonder what the man wanted, why he kept coming back, why he chose me. I'll never know. The scariest part isn't what he did, or even what he might have done. It's how quickly fear can take over your life, how it can change the way you see the world, the way you see yourself. I don't go out at night anymore. I don't trust strangers, don't trust empty places, don't trust the feeling of being alone. The gas station is still there, but I can't bring myself to go back. Sometimes when I drive by, I think I see someone standing by the door, watching, waiting. Maybe it's just my imagination. Or maybe some things never really go away. The summer before I left for college, I took a job mowing lawns around town. It was easy work, and I liked being outside, headphones in, just me and the sound of the mower. Most of my clients were older folks who'd wave from their porches or bring me lemonade. But there was one house at the end of Maple Street that always made me uneasy. It was a big, old place, paint peeling, windows always closed, even on the hottest days. The owner, Mr. Harlan, was a quiet man in his 70s. He never spoke much, just handed me cash through the screen door and watched from inside as I worked. One afternoon, I finished mowing and noticed the back gate was open. I'd never seen it open before. I figured maybe Mr. Harlan had forgotten to close it, so I went to shut it. As I walked around the side of the house, I heard voices, low, urgent, coming from the basement window. I stopped, thinking maybe he had company, but the voices didn't sound friendly. They sounded scared. I couldn't make out the words, just the tone, pleading, desperate. I stood there, frozen, listening. The voices stopped suddenly, and I heard footsteps coming up the basement stairs. I hurried back to the front yard, heart pounding, and pretended to check the mower. Mr. Harlan came out a minute later, his face blank, eyes cold. He handed me my money and told me not to come back for a while, and said he was going out of town. I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong in that house. For days, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd heard. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, maybe a TV, maybe a phone call. But the fear in those voices stuck with me. I asked around, but nobody seemed to know much about Mr. Harlan. He'd lived in town forever, but kept to himself. Some people said his wife had died years ago. Others said she'd just left. No one really knew. A week later, I rode my bike past the house. The curtains were drawn, the mailbox overflowing. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? That I heard voices? That the old man was acting strange? I convinced myself I was overreacting. But then, one night, I saw flashing lights at the end of Maple Street. Police cars, an ambulance, neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, whispering. I stopped and watched from a distance as officers carried boxes out of Mr. Harlan's house. They put up yellow tape and kept everyone back. I heard someone say they'd found something in the basement. The next day, the whole town was talking. Rumors spread fast. Some said it was drugs, others said it was something worse. The truth was quieter, but somehow even more disturbing. Turns out, Mr. Harlan had been keeping people in his basement. Runaways mostly, kids who'd left home, people nobody would miss. He'd lure them in with promises of food or a place to stay, then lock them up. Some had been there for weeks. The police said he'd been doing it for years, right under everyone's noses. The voices I'd heard were real. They were people, trapped just a few feet away from where I'd been mowing the lawn. The night they arrested Mr. Harlan, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head, the open gate, the voices, the way he'd looked at me that day. I wondered what would have happened if I'd gone to the police sooner, if I'd trusted my gut instead of brushing it off. I felt sick thinking about how close I'd been, how I'd stood just outside while people were trapped inside, hoping someone would hear them. The next morning, I saw the news crews outside the house, reporters asking neighbors if they'd noticed anything strange. Most people said no. Some said Mr. Harlan was just a lonely old man. I kept quiet, too ashamed to admit I'd heard something and done nothing. I kept thinking about the kids they found, about how scared they must have been, about how nobody noticed until it was almost too late. For weeks, I couldn't walk past that house. I avoided Maple Street, avoided talking to anyone about what happened. I kept seeing Mr. Harlan's face in my mind, the way his eyes had gone cold when he told me not to come back. I wondered if he knew I'd heard, if he'd been planning to do something about it. The thought made my skin crawl. After Mr. Harlan's arrest, the town changed. People started locking their doors, looking at each other with suspicion. Parents kept their kids close, and nobody let strangers in anymore. The house on Maple Street sat empty, the grass growing tall, the windows boarded up. Sometimes, I'd see people stop and stare, shaking their heads, whispering about what had happened. I tried to move on, but the guilt stayed with me. I kept thinking about the voices, about how I could have helped, how I could have done something. I started having nightmares, waking up in the middle of the night, sure I could hear someone calling for help. I stopped mowing lawns, stopped going out alone. The world felt smaller, darker, less safe. Even now, years later, I still think about that summer. I wonder what would have happened if I'd spoken up, if I'd trusted what I heard instead of doubting myself. I wonder how many people walk past something terrible and do nothing, just because it's easier to believe everything is fine. The scariest part isn't what Mr. Harlan did, or even how long he got away with it. It's how easy it was for all of us to look the other way, to pretend we didn't see, didn't hear, didn't know. Sometimes late at night, I still hear those voices in my dreams, pleading, desperate, hoping someone will listen. I know now that evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like a neighbor, a quiet old man, a house you pass every day. And sometimes, the real horror is realizing you could have made a difference, but you didn't. That's the part that never really goes away.